Hey everyone, I'm Ben Gershman. This is What Could Be Bad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very, very excited to have Paul Rieckhoff as our guest today. If you don't know Paul, let me tell you a little bit about him because he's an amazing human being who I admire very much and have been lucky to know for a bunch of years now. Paul is, well, let me start, I guess, chronologically from everything I know and tell me if I'm missing anything. All right, so you served in the National Guard or the Reserve?
Yep.
Yeah.
Army, National Guard, Reserve. I did all three after 9/11.
Okay, and then at 9/11, you were there and you were a first responder,
Yep.
which in automatic sense for me, you are a national hero for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you served in Iraq and you led an infantry division.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is incredible in itself. So you're a veteran of our
It's
nation.
incredible, all right. I don't know if it's incredible the same way you say, but I appreciate the love.
There's a lot within that, right?
Yeah,
Like for the way you see it, the way I see it, the way everyone sees it.
Yeah.
Then you went and helped all your brothers and sisters who you served with and started the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, which is an organization O.A.R. was able to partner with and do a lot of good for and with.
A ton of good.
Yeah,
a ton of good.
We were really lucky to partner with you guys, and I still look back on that and thankful for the introduction from our friend Bob Ferguson for kind of connecting those dots.
Big shout out to Bob Ferguson.
Yeah,
Bob Ferguson is like a guiding hand of music and impact for decades.
Yeah, he's like the universal connector of good people.
He is.
And only good people. But then you wrote Chasing Ghosts, a phenomenal document of what you went through and the actual feelings and stories about your experiences in Iraq with your brothers and sisters over there. And then from that, you kind of left IAVA a little bit after that. And then you started a media organization and your own podcast, Independent Americans, which I hope everyone checks out because it's very informative and it's very relevant to our everyday lives and important to check out. At that point, you're sharing your own individual views. You're not just organizationally working. You're really doing this to make sure the way you see things is getting out there unfiltered.
Yeah. But
you're also a media correspondent on CNN now. So this arc, Paul, is
the girl has left the band is kind of what happened, right?
Yeah. And throughout all this, you also became a husband and a father to two boys. You live in New York City, and you're just always doing good things. And I'm really impressed, by everything you do, the way you carry yourself. I want to also say thank you because you were one of the first people I bounced the idea of What Could Be Bad off of. And immediately your words were, I'm all in. And that means a ton to me because I wasn't sure if the concept makes sense or should be something to go at. And you gave me a lot of encouragement, which has us sitting here now. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's an honor to be your friend. We've been friends a long time now. I think we were trying to figure it out maybe 15, 20 years now. I don't know how long it is. Right?
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
It was right after we went on our USO tour to Iraq.
We met in a bar.
Yeah.
I think we might have tried to meet in Sebastian Younger's bar, but we ended up eating a bar somewhere on the West Side. Bob Ferguson introduced us.
Yeah.
And I was already a fan. But then to hear that you guys were committed to the cause was really, really important. And it was at a time, too, when it wasn't really popular.
Yeah.
Like a lot of folks weren't going to Iraq or anywhere else on the USO tour either because it was dangerous or because it was viewed as too political.
Right.
And I think the common theme throughout our entire relationship is you have heart, man. You have a real deep heart and you're a brilliantly talented artist and creative yourself.
Thank you.
And I got welcomed into the O.A.R. family and Mark is now a friend. All the guys are friends and you guys have been really kind and supportive to our cause and so many causes. And I think, you guys are in many ways, I think, an example for what music can do.
Yeah.
The way you bring people together, the positive community. Every time you walk into an O.A.R. show, it feels special.
Thank you.
It feels like home, right? It feels very, very cool. And I'm excited to go see you guys June 24th or 5th, I think, Pier 17, New York. My wife said, tell Benj we're coming. We're bringing the boys.
Yeah.
That's so one of my favorite venues in America. But also now to see you branching out. You're sharing that heart and you're opening other people's hearts and I'm all in on anything you're doing.
I appreciate
I'm all on Team Benj, always have been, always will be. And I'm excited for you in this next chapter where you continue to give back. You're giving back in so many ways and it couldn't come in a more important time, man.
I appreciate it. I think this year is a very interesting time for our nation and, and the people of our nation have so many, bits coming at them, but cultural elements, there's political elements, there's life elements, the economy, like, do we have enough money to pay for our food? Can we go out to that movie that we want to? Budget stuff is real. Inflation has really hit us all. And I think, there's stress out there. And this effort that I'm doing here is really about trying to take a little bit of that pressure off, show that there's people going through real things, learn from that, hopefully, create a little inspiration within that, and open the dialogue up about mental health issues, because they're pretty taboo. I feel like it's not like that easy to talk about these things, obviously. And for me personally, I'm finding a bit of a catharsis within it, where my own health issues, my physical health issues led to mental health problems that I had to deal with and I'm still dealing with. And all of this is, I think, helping me just figure it out more. And I really want each connection that I'm able to make I think if I can learn something, whoever checks it out will learn something. And that's kind of where I'm sort of aiming at taking this whole thing, is just try to learn along the way. And, I guess I want to, before we get into sort of the current stuff, there's some historical things that I think, maybe like people could learn from you about what our veterans are going through when they're overseas, when they're serving, even not even overseas, but, when they're at a base and they don't get to see their family for a while, whatever it might be. I think I want to hear a little bit from you, with your experience serving at such a pivotal time in American history, being away from home. I mean, you weren't married at that time, but like, how does it feel to be in the boots? When you're walking around a country that you personally were trying to help. I mean, having read Chasing Ghosts, you're trying to do the right thing in every circumstance, but you're not always in that position where it's easy to find the right thing or to do the right thing. And a lot of times you get orders, that you have conflicting emotions about. I mean, how does that hit you?
All of that kind of feels like 2024 America or 2024 the world. It's why you're doing this show. Like what I've learned, I've been doing this for 20 years now, is that we're kind of in a permanent state of chaos. It kind of always feels like war. So you may not be carrying a rifle in Iraq or in Ukraine or somewhere else, but you can relate to the general stressful atmosphere that exists around you. Not knowing what's coming next, not knowing what kind of turbulence is going to happen, not knowing what's going to be on the news, not knowing how your family's going to be impacted. It could be by COVID or by a wildfire. So I think, this is a perfect time for you to launch this conversation, because it goes back to you. I mean, it's your heart, but it's also a community. And what I found in my service and in my work is that mental health is an absolutely critical part of a deeper community that is kind of hard to self-identify, right? Like we're finally opening the box and having a real conversation about mental health. And I think veterans have helped jumpstart that. There's an old saying that the only victor in war is medicine. And we were having conversations about post-traumatic stress disorder, about depression, about suicide back in 2004 when I first got home from Iraq. So I remember having conversations with the Obama White House saying, we want the president to say people are dying by suicide, not killing themselves. So like changing the language and the way the president talks about something as significant as suicide, so that we can normalize it, so that we can use, technically effective language, prevent contagion, right? And just open that conversation. So I feel like all that is to say, I think I kind of was born into trauma. And this is long before 9/11, before Iraq. I grew up in a home where my mother was dealing with a lot of mental health illness. She had bipolar disorder from the time I was born, but this was in the 80s. What it did was it kind of steeled me and informed me, and of course impacted me. It was trauma. Right? I grew up in trauma. And I think that kind of helped guide me through 9/11, Iraq, and then turning it into being kind of a crusader for mental health and other people who had experienced trauma. So maybe the biggest insight of our 20 years at IAVA is that mental health is not just about veterans, right? This is a public health priority. And what we hope to be able to do is normalize it, because you can get PTSD as a civilian, whether it's through a sexual assault or a terrible accident, right? And I think we've helped move the ball forward. And that's where our partnership was so key, man. I mean, doing videos that were mainstreaming conversations about mental health. You guys helping us raise money for direct support. It was kind of a hand in glove that needed to happen. But at the end of the day, it's about community.
Yeah.
Right? The same community you create an O.A.R. show, the same community you have at a basketball game, the same community you have in your family. And it's brought me to this point now where a lot of my work is focused on politics and news, but also trying to bring that perspective of how it impacts people.
Yeah.
And the fact that people need help, right? And they need guides.
Yeah.
I think in the same way, there's probably times when you guys are doing a song on stage where you're pulling the band, and other times when Jerry's pulling the band or Mark's pulling the band. We need you to guide us through this because you're a voice that people trust. And I will tell you this, this is gonna save lives.
I hope so.
It will.
Yeah.
And you won't always know it.
Yeah.
But 20 years from now, 10 years from now, somebody's gonna walk up to you and say, hey man, I was going through a really tough time. Your show gave me hope. Your show gave me inspiration. Your show gave me strength. Your show made me feel not alone.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
You and I have never talked about a lot of this stuff. So
I know.
that in and of itself is why this is so important and why it's timely. Because maybe I'll wrap it with this and say, this is our new normal. Shit is going to be chaotic.
Yeah, totally.
It's going to be stressful. Yeah. It's going to be hard. And once you kind of accept that is our new reality,
right,
then you have a different orientation. You kind of prepare yourself differently.
Yeah.
And you know that, you don't have to be afraid of everything.
Yeah.
But you do have to, for example, teach your children to deal with school shootings.
Yes.
I was doing a visit at my school last week.
I don't want to have to do that, and my kid is just getting to the point.
I did it last week.
Yeah.
I went in for my son's birthday. He's 5 years old, and he did the pre-K class visit. Right. So we go in, we do cupcakes, we dance with the kids, have a great time. I was like, hey, let's go check out my other boy who's in second grade on the 4th floor. And as soon as we walk in, we check in with him. Boom, lights go out, loudspeaker, this is a drill, everybody, we're gonna do a soft lockdown.
Yeah.
And I'm in a classroom with a bunch of little kids. They weren't necessarily the kids from that classroom, 2 teachers, and I watched them operate. And it was a lot like watching military people who practically deal with a situation. But that's our new normal, right? My kid was sitting there reading his Captain Underpants book. He's like, okay, it's another one, right? The teachers are generally trying to keep us calm because they know this is new to us. And that, unfortunately, is our new normal. So I tell my kids all the time, don't be scared, be prepared.
Yeah.
Because it's a natural reaction to be scared. It's a natural reaction to be worried or concerned or have anxiety. But the more you prepare yourself for difficult situations and for the reality and work with other people, then the better you'll do through it. And you can pull people along. Right?
Yeah. But but preparing a child for a school shooting is not like preparing a soldier for war. And what do you think that does to the kid's psyche moving forward? Do you think this is like desensitizing them from violence? Do you think this is like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, it's fucking insane, right? Let's start with that. Yeah. There's a level of it that is insane. It's also sad.
Right.
And I think I've learned through my own therapy too, part of what you have to do sometimes is mourn. And say, it's okay to be sad with that and sit with that and say, I'm sad about the fact that is our reality. And then you can move forward with a plan of action. I think that one thing we've learned is that talking about it and having a conversation and opening yourself up is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Sure.
And that was where the veterans community was key. We had to say to them, look, you're not a wimp if you go talk to somebody. We have to normalize mental health screening, which was part of our policy priorities. We just want to normalize or make sure everybody gets checked.
Yeah.
That was a difficult thing to get past in 2005, 2006, right?
Can you share what is the check? How do you go about that? And maybe some things that people might even be able to do, on their own to know where they're at. Is there?
I mean, it's evolved now where the Department of Defense, when you're discharged from the military, has a full mental health evaluation on the outside, right? And it should be, a series of questionnaires. You're supposed to sit down with a mental health professional. And they used to call them, the don't beat your wife briefings. Right? They would say, hey, we've been through a lot of stuff. Don't drink too much. Don't beat up your wife.
Yeah.
Go back home and good luck. But we also know, the World War II generation didn't get that as an example.
Okay.
And they did drink a lot and have a lot of domestic violence, right? That's not talked about in the greatest generation.
Sure.
But there was a lot of domestic violence.
Sure.
There was a lot of heavy drinking. There was suicide. There was violence. And that was a byproduct of untreated mental health trauma. Right? So I think we have advanced. And I think it starts with treating mental health like total health.
Yes.
Right? If you blow your knee out playing basketball with your buddies, you're not just going to try to truck along. You're going to go see a doctor, get your knee checked out.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling well in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit, then you also can get that checked out. And just like the knee therapy, some people may want to go and do some kind of NFL therapy. Others may want to take it slow. For some people, it's it's a psychologist. For
Yeah.
some people, it's medication.
Yeah.
For some people, it's cannabis.
Yeah.
For some people, it's equine therapy or service dogs.
Sure.
And that's what we've seen again in the veterans community, is that it's not a one size fits all. And
Yeah.
the key for me in this work is letting people know they're not alone.
Yes.
There is a community.
Okay.
There is understanding, and there is help.
Yeah.
But and the last part that I think gets forgotten, you're needed.
Yeah.
So now you got through your trauma, and
Yeah.
you're always dealing with that, but now you're pulling others forward.
Yeah.
And there's somebody listening or watching today that will draft off of you. And that person who feels like they just can't get through another day is one day going to be helping others. And that's when it comes full circle.
Yes.
And that's why I'm a bit optimistic, Benj, about like this environment.
Totally. And a quote comes to mind with this is like, having true intelligence is having the ability to change. And I'm probably butchering that. And
Nice.
I don't remember who said it. I'm terrible with the names of that. But it's really accurate, because I think we all need to be smart enough to know we need to change.
Yeah.
And once you're kind of cognizant or identify the fact that that's a need, that you will grow and that this will become a better place because of that, it's really important to actually like look at your own life, look at how you're treating yourself, look at how you're treating your neighbors. And for me, what clued me into like having things to like deal with was I wasn't treating the people that were closest to me the way I would want to be treated. And I began to see this pattern that just kept growing, and it evolved into very destructive destructive to the relationships. I wasn't like, taking a baseball bat to anybody's car or anything like that, like I did in high school. But like, I've grown a lot, and through going through these moments, where I'm realizing, I never used to have like this crazy road rage. Like that guy didn't really cut me off, but I'm still mad as about it, And I just saw a pattern developing. I think that's like a tip off. But as far as
can I answer one of the questions you asked too? Though,
Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah.
I think it starts with asking yourself honestly, how am I doing? Right? Like, how am I doing? And if you can't get closer to that, like, am I feeling well?
Yeah.
Is my life have some degree of stability or certainty?
Mm-hmm.
How are my friendships?
Yeah.
How are my relationships with the people closest to me? How's my physical health?
Sure.
How much am I drinking?
Yeah.
How much am I arguing with people? And if you can't get to the point where you feel like you can honestly assess yourself, ask your people close to you. So I think recognizing that no matter how big or small your network is, if you're in a big globally recognized band, or you're a guy who's working in a restaurant, you're living alone, your energy is contagious, and you can decide how you want to approach each day. You can decide, am I going to be a negative force in the world? Am I going to call everybody an asshole, or am I going to try to be positive each day? And every day is a chance to reset.
Yeah. And
every day is a day to influence others.
Yeah. Totally.
And I think that's a really important shift in a lot of people's mindset. You don't have to be a massive podcast success to have influence.
Yeah.
Your sphere of influence is the people around you.
Yeah, totally.
And that can be really profound.
Absolutely. And also, like, if you train your mind to see certain things, you're going to look for those things, right? I was watching Tony Robbins do this really interesting thing with Theo Vaughn, I think is his name, and he was like, all right, so look
Comedian?
around. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. That must be fun.
Yeah, it was a cool one. He was like, look around the room, tell me when you see something brown, and he spotted everything brown, and he's like, okay, now tell me everything red in the room. And he was like, I wasn't looking for, I didn't know. And so you find what you're looking for, and then he goes back and he also says, did you see things in the room that were beige and you wanted to coat them as brown so that you're more successful in your attempt to find everything brown in there? There's all these behaviors that I think we can find in ourselves that if we know they're going on and we can really take a step back from our behavior and look at our existence, you can shift those things if you can, take the time to wrap your head around it and begin a new kind of pattern for yourself. And having gone through that, it is fucking hard. Yeah. And it is heartbreaking too, because you realize how much time you have spent in these moments of difficult, it's like dissension with yourself, you're dissonant, with your own chords or whatever for a musical, analogy. And that's troublesome to me because I understand, I've seen it, I've felt it, of trying to get out of that. Yeah. And it wasn't one thing. It wasn't, just take this pill and everything's all good. It's work. So I
think that's right. I think it's important to recognize that it's work and it's discipline, right? You have to require a certain degree of discipline to take a shower in the morning, to brush your teeth, to work out, to eat good food, to be a positive role model. You have to actually make a conscious decision. I am obviously a big proponent of forward planning, but I think maybe if I were to put a button on another piece of insight that I've found is that you need mentors.
Yes.
Right? You need someone who can take you through this, who's been through it themselves.
Yeah.
Not your know-it-all buddy who says, I got all the answers because I watched a TV show or podcast or because I took a psych class in college.
I saw this Instagram post.
Yeah. But like, okay, I went through a traumatic thing. Like I went through combat as an example.
Yeah.
I need to be around other people who can relate to that experience and who are further down that road than I am and that I respect and I have a connection with. And they're hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think in the absence of that, you can also look toward public mentors, if you will. Who do I want to be like? I want to be like Tony Robbins. I want to be like Ben Gershman, right? And that's why I think your show is important because some people, this is what I found out in the veteran space especially, some people have no one.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to admit. Somebody's watching right now that is totally alone and they need to know that I'm out there, you're out there. There are a lot of people who are accessible. There are also places like the crisis support line.
Sure.
And the suicide text line and other resources that anybody can go to for free, which are important. But also, there are people out there that you can look up to and say, I want to be like that person. I want to be like that person as a parent, as a citizen, as an activist, and aspire toward where they are and learn about how they're doing it and how they got through it. Because when they're out in front of the podcast, everything looks great. Yeah. But there have been some hard and dark times they're not necessarily broadcast.
I guess what some stuff you were saying that I want to ask about is like, what you've done as a mentor of, founding IAVA and building that community within it, once you got that going, did you see like leaders popping up that were within it? I mean, obviously I know you were a leader there, but like, did you see people like, taking the reins within themselves, like gaining from the idea that, or from the community itself, and that betters them, but then they help others within it? Do you see these in real world?
Yeah, and I think that's
the snowball effect or something.
Yes, and I think that's where public leadership is important.
Yeah.
And to your point, yes, like there are leaders that have emerged over 20 years of IBA. Some of them have gone to work as therapists at the VA. Some of them have just become better parents. Yeah. Some of them are, Wes Moore is the governor of Maryland. Right?
Totally.
So another positive
I'm
influence.
so happy he won. I wish I could have voted for him, but like I was so psyched that he did that. That he took the step of running and that he ran such a wonderful campaign and he won over the hearts of so many people in Maryland. I feel like it's like he just has a wonderful opportunity to like move the state forward.
He's a positive human being and that's really critical right now. Yeah. We need positive people. I mean, if you look at somebody like Zelensky in Ukraine, like he's positive, he's encouraging. He's almost more like a football coach, and he's on the ground, right? Like we've all been in environments, whether it's with a band or at a job or working in a restaurant, where somebody who's kind of driving other people forward. And I think we have to celebrate more of those people and protect them. Yeah. Right? Because it's easy to see Wes or you or me or someone else out there on TV doing good shit, but you don't know about what happens when you go home and you're feeling depressed or you're feeling worn out. Yeah. And I think you touched on one thing that I think is important to talk about, which is we are all fucking tired. Yeah. It has been really hard over this last couple of years. Yeah. And there's a couple things, I've said this before to friends, that there are a couple things you can only experience if you've gone through them. Right? Combat, I think, is one. Yeah. I think that parenthood is another one. And my wife will tell me childbirth, right? Yeah. But I think a pandemic is like that too. Yeah. Right? Unless you lived through that, you couldn't understand how crazy that shit was. Yeah. It's just too much to actually encapsulate. And we have to give ourselves a little grace or at least a little understanding that was hard for everybody. And when something is hard for everybody, we all feel it and it's a collective weight. But as we used to say in the Army too, we all bond in the suck. Yeah. And there's a collective connective tissue that has developed. I don't think it's been unearthed enough, but this conversation, others are part of it. Just talking about, look, everybody's had some degree of trauma, and living through a pandemic is traumatic. It is. That's hard. So you got to give yourself grace. You got to give yourself rest. You got to take care of yourself, right? And whether that's eating or just shutting it off for a couple hours. Totally. That is a culture that I think we have to promote and try to demonstrate by example too. Yeah, I think the pandemic illuminated a lot of things in our country. Like it sort of like was like a hyper-focused like look at the problems because we all basically retreated to our homes to like watch our world through a screen for a while. Yeah. And then you start to realize how much inundation we have from sources of information that are purely, media.
And it's also, I think there's a culture building of like whatever you see on TV or social media, like you almost assume it's true just because it's there. But there's so much more to every point that's being made, and facts are always, debatable. Like once they're on TV or in a newspaper, even like, that people, there's retractions all the time that you don't hear about, and that can instill a belief in people. And that's troublesome, I think, for people's general worldviews. And right now we're in this time where we're kind of in the position of constructing which way the world goes, not only for our own country, but for the world, for this whole planet.
Yes.
And it's like we're the country of America is in this position where I don't want to call us the bully, but we're the big guy on the block, but we're starting to make ourselves look kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And I don't appreciate it. I also come from a family that immigrated here, in the early 1900s, and they basically were, escaping the pogroms in Russia, which, is actually modern day Ukraine, where my family was from. And they left spur of the moment because they were basically told, if you don't go, we're going to come back and kill your whole family. You have a couple hours to pick up and go. And that started a migration that basically made me the beneficiary of, all these generations of my family. But when they got here, they were starting over. And there's even a whole episode in immigration that I could talk about like the challenges for people that are coming over now and that stuff. But I guess what I'm getting at is like there's this wave of cultural like feelings and info that really doesn't feel very American to me, because I feel so tied to the idea that our country is built because of people coming over here. And I know there's opposing views, and I don't want to get political, but it just doesn't feel like the kind of, what's the, like, whether you're rich or poor. There's that quote about at the Statue of Liberty that I'm blanking on.
You're tired, you're poor, you're other masses.
Yeah, like bring them all here, we want them all, we'll take them all. And that's like what we're supposed to be to me. And it's stressful to know that, like, it's like, get out. But I know there's a lot to that, because they're inundating certain places and states and lives within those areas. It's just, I feel like there's an intolerance building. There's this lack of sort of like listening building, and I'm hopeful that conversations like this will actually show that you talk about the hard stuff, you learn something, but it's also that we can all maybe do a little better. It's just a lot to be an American right now.
It is, and I feel you on that, and I think what we're all feeling is this kind of collective disintegration, hyper-partisanship, commercialization.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've had the great author Sebastian Junger on my show a couple of times, and he's brilliant. If folks don't know, he wrote The Perfect Storm. He wrote a great book called Tribe. He's written a fantastic book that I recommend called Freedom. And he talks a lot on my show about how he has created an environment of freedom for himself.
Yeah.
And some of that has to do with disconnecting himself from the wash. And it's something that I've tried to implement in my life in the last couple of months. And I think it's been effective in helping me become more healthy. And it starts with like being deliberate about how you start your day.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I decide that I am not going to reach for my phone when I first open my eyes. Right? The first thing I want to do is either look at my kids, look at my wife, or look at the sunshine. And if I can't find the sunshine, I got to go try to find it. Just a couple of minutes before I pick up the phone, before I allow it all to come at me. And then I've gotten into what a lot of folks are doing with the crazy cold shower to start the day.
Love the cold plunge, love the cold shower.
I live in New York, so I don't have enough for a plunge pool, but I go in a really cold shower that gets my blood going. It makes me feel alive. It makes me feel awake. It makes me breathe hard, right? And it's a hard thing to do that kind of grounds you to start the day, right? And then definitely get sunshine. I try to do a little bit of exercising, even if it's just, I always try to do 60 jumping jacks, 30 push-ups, 30 squats, and do some stretching. Even if it takes me like 3 minutes, right? And then get into it, right? Then get into picking up your phone. Don't let the email disrupt you when you're taking a leak or whatever else. Like, try to control your rhythm.
It's such a good practice.
And it's very, very hard to do, but it's also that much more important in America right now, because I think what we're lacking, Benj, is a set of shared values.
Yeah.
Right? And that is the dysfunction of America now that I hope we can regain. It's the dysfunction in America that Putin loves to see and our enemies are celebrating.
Yeah, absolutely.
When they see us so divided and fighting in the streets, going back to 9/11, it's Osama bin Laden's dream to see us fighting over our elections, to see us fighting over everything.
Yeah.
And I think what we need is a bit of that recentering of the values that are on the Statue of Liberty that brought your, predecessors here, and mine too. My grandparents came here with nothing. They didn't speak English. I think I've got it hard. My grandmother was 16 years old, didn't speak English, and came here on a fucking boat.
I know.
Okay, as a 16-year-old girl by herself on a boat.
Dude, my grandmother was 2.
Right? I mean, so,
same deal. Like, it's just insane what
we've
they
got it hard, right? But they had it
like
right, and it's relative.
Yeah.
But I think it comes back to what is it about this place that we have chosen to live that we value, and what are the things that we value as a family, as a country, as a person. And in the Army, there's the acronym leadership, and it's loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage.
Yeah.
And that's one construct, right? But if you just think about honor, are you living honorably?
Yeah.
Are you doing the right thing? Are you cheating and stealing? Are you treating people with respect? Are you treating people with kindness? Right? And with a lack of trust in institutions, right? Whether it's a church or a government or businesses, I think we're coming back to like some really basic stuff, and it is often stuff like music.
Yeah.
And like I go to one of your shows, man. I'm like, this is what America should be like. It's kindness, it's community, but it's also
diversity. It's the it's the House of Blues motto, unity and diversity. That's what this should all be.
Yeah, and maybe we got to go back to that. Maybe we got to go back to recognizing that it's music. Sometimes it's sports.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's shared suffering. It's, shit, a hurricane's coming.
I know, right?
But I think recognizing...
Well, like 9/11 bonded us together in a way that I don't think I've seen in my lifetime. I was born in 1980. And I mean, granted, I was pretty young, but I just remember this feeling of like, all right, you can't fuck with our country. Like, we're all in this,
Yeah.
And I think to everything you're saying, I agree. And I think for me, the other word that's really big in this is morality.
What I always go back to is you can control your sphere of influence, right? Like you can control the audience that listens and sees this show. The people who are here because they either care about the topic or they heard about me, or they most likely because they trust you.
Yeah.
When I started my show, a really experienced radio guy told me they come for the guest, but they stay for the host. And, maybe they came because they know me, but they're going to stay with you because of your tone, because of your values, because of your expression of morality. And I think that at the end of the day, like maybe an overarching theme of this conversation, everything I'm doing is like, it's time to step up.
Yeah.
Like everybody has to step up in whatever way you can, even if it's just taking better care of your grandma or taking better care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like you can't sit on the sidelines right now.
I agree.
If only because maybe COVID reminded us all that life is pretty precious.
Yeah.
And this environment we're operating in right now is not one that I think you want to squander a day or your life.
Totally.
And anybody can make a positive impact right now. I know that sounds kind of rote, but I've seen it in the world of activism. I've seen it, even if it's just saving the life of another person who's struggling or improving the life of someone who's struggling. You're setting that example. That's why I think this show is so important in the entire theme of it. You've thought it through.
I have.
And when you first told me about it, I'm like, yes.
That was on an early morning walk that became a routine for me.
Yeah.
Like getting up at 5 and leaving the house, not turning on the phone. To your point, I think that's a super healthy behavior to employ if you're feeling anxious or depressed. And actually, it's something I should make clear is like, I didn't even know what anxiety felt like. And I've been dealing with it for like decades. And when I finally knew what that was like, I was like, oh my God, like that's that's anxiety. So sidebar aside, my question is, being within the news, being within media, do you feel that there is a link between people's well-being and mental health to the fact that the media is becoming, not the media, just a lot of social media, news media, they're different things, but they're kind of becoming entertainment to a lot of people. And I think personally, to me, that it's a given, but I want to hear it, like, how do you see that? And what do you think is right or wrong about that being kind of an element of our culture now?
I would go even further. It's not entertainment. It's the way people are constructing value. in themselves.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is by design.
Yeah.
Right? Because the media, for the most part, is a corporate media establishment that is based on profit and is trying to sell you some shit. Yeah. So I play a game with my kids, right? It's very difficult to shield your kids from commercials, which in my view is sometimes the most corrupted part of modern media entertainment, especially if you watch sports.
Yeah.
If you watch sports, you're going to get some crazy fucking horror movie, and then you're going to get, you know, a boner pill, and then you're going to get something out. It's just constant. And we play a game with my kids called What Are They Trying to Sell You?
Yeah. And
do this with yourselves, with your friends. Like sit down and go, imagine you can't read, and you're 4 years old, you're 3 years old. What are they trying to sell you? And then, like, my son will say, wow, they're trying to sell you a vacation. No, it's a heart medication, right? Like, you know, or they're trying to sell you a beautiful car. No, it's another kind of medication, or it's a media thing. Like this bait and switch that happens is pretty consistent, especially if you look at it through children's eyes. Yeah. And CNN is one that I do from time to time. I do a lot on MSNBC. Now I do on
I simplify.
No, that's good. Yeah. And I get to, the advantage it gives me is I get to see them all. Yeah. Like there were days when I would do Fox, CNN, and MSNBC and do kind of a hat trick. There was one day where I did like Megyn Kelly, Rachel Maddow, and Anderson Cooper all in the same hour. So I got to visit all these weird worlds.
Do you feel like there's like, by the questions they're asking you and the way they're leading conversation, do you feel like there's an agenda?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, the agenda of the thing is profit. Yeah. Right? Unless, and let me give you some examples of exceptions, unless it's PBS. Right? Like you have to think about where you're visiting, right? Like when you walk into the store, what are they trying to sell you? Are they trying to sell you? Is it a public library like PBS? Yeah. Or is it the Nintendo store? Right. Right? Like Comedy Central or something else, right? And I think being very, very disciplined about your media intake is hard. Yeah. Maybe it's harder than not drinking or not smoking or whatever else is your vice. But media has become kind of a vice in our society. It's become also a status. Yeah. So people feel like they have to be up on things or they don't know. And I think it's about reasserting our control as individuals, right? I started my show in part because there was no voice like mine that focused on independent politics, that focused on positive stories of helpers, that focused on national security and defense. Yeah. We were covering the national security components of COVID. We were covering the Ukraine war. We were covering Israel and Gaza. A lot of times my biggest frustration, Benj, is I'm booked to come on and talk about something and it gets shifted. Today, I was booked to come on and talk about Ukraine, to talk about the rise of independence in Super Tuesday. There's some Trump news. So feed that fucking machine. They know that Trump gets ratings. They know that Trump is what this certain audience wants. Yeah. So national security, the stuff that's more tactical, maybe more nerdy, maybe more important even, gets shifted. So I think it's about, in the same way, you can decide how to start your day and look at the sunshine instead of looking at your phone. You can say no, because the corporate media, and what I mean by that is like corporate television, cable television, for the most part, social media sites are trying to influence you. Yeah. And if you want to take it a step further, they're also being manipulated by enemies that are trying to neutralize you. So if you walk in every day and say, boy, Vladimir Putin wants me to fight with people. Vladimir Putin wants me to get angry. He wants us all to get angry, so we destroy ourselves, and he can basically, conquer the world. Yeah. Right? That's what Kim Jong-un wants. That's what ISIS wants. That's what Hamas wants. Right? Like, pick an enemy. Right? A lot of them are celebrating right now because they see Americans distracted.
We're doing it to ourselves.
They see us divided, and they see us diminished. And I think that is the opportunity that we have to seize upon to control it. So watch Benj's show. Turn off the fucking cable news, and that's what it's about. And change your diet of media, and make it a healthier one. Yeah, and start, if you have kids especially, start with that. Yeah, right. And one of the things I would challenge you to do, I know it costs a little more, or it takes a little more work. Try to insulate them from commercials. Yeah, because when you flip on, they're watching Teletubbies or whatever fucking shit they're watching, you may turn away and they just got hit with a barrage of commercials, and their little impressionable soft minds are. They come back and all of a sudden they want 1,000 Legos, right? And they want 1 million different things because they are so susceptible. So I think all that is to say is I think media is maybe, it's not just about profit even. It's not just about entertainment. It's like crack. Yeah. They want you hooked. Totally. They want you on it.
So The other
And
thing,
so power to binge. Okay, like more binge, more music, and I mean this. And this is what I'm going to do a plug for you.
Okay.
You got to support the people who are doing it. When Benj launches a show, you got to support it. You can take 3 minutes and share it with 50 friends, right? You're sharing a bunch of other shit, something you saw on TikTok or something you saw on X or Twitter. And you can take a minute and say, this is something I believe in.
Yeah.
This is something that shares my values. This is something that I think is doing good in the world, and put a little skin behind it, right? And that's where we can start to take back some of the land, because I think that's what it is. It's kind of a fight for the soul of America. And I think, just to go one step further on the macro, it's a fight for the world right now. I tell my son all the time, if a little kid punches you, you don't have the right to pound him. Right? Sometimes you have to let the little kid hit you and say, okay, I know you're little, don't take the bait. I tell him, don't be Draymond Green.
It's great.
Don't
great
throw the punch. Right? And we're kind of being baited every day in the media and the stimuli. And it's on all of us to be a little bit tougher, be a little more disciplined, and to encourage others to resist that temptation.
Absolutely. And along all these lines, I think the other thing that can be done is tolerate. Right? Like, listen to your neighbors who have different opinions, right? Like, that is what makes America America, is it's okay to believe something completely different. One thing I love about listening to Bill Maher, right? Like, not everybody's going to agree with him. He doesn't agree with everybody else, that's for sure. You know, but he will listen, and he will take it in, and he will give you his honest feedback. And I think that's really important in this next year. Instead of letting the divide grow, instead of letting the polarization intensify, we need to learn to be able to hear what people are saying, even if it's crazy. You know, like,
there's some crazy too. I love Bill Maher as an example, because I think I've done Bill Maher's show 3 times, which is kind of a surreal experience. I did it once on 9/11, which was also a surreal experience. So
real time or
Bill Maher on HBO, right? Which people, you'll appreciate. Like, a lot of the work I've done over the years, I never get paid. They usually don't even pay for travel. Bill Maher is the one show that people know. They fly you first class, they put you in a hotel, they send you a driver, and I think they pay you $500, which tells you something about how he values his guests. Now, none of us, at least I'm not in it for the money. If I was, I would have done something else. But the thing about Bill Maher's show that I loved, the way he used to do it, was afterward everybody would hang out. You'd go to a room and there'd be all the HBO talent. I remember I met Kid from Kid and Play, and Jim Gray from HBO Sports was in there, and it was this kind of party, and people were drinking, people were smoking, but it was a convening afterward, a sense of community. And I remember one time I did the show with Andrew Sullivan. Another time I was there with Mike Shinoda from Lincoln Park, right? And like, we're all in this kind of chill family atmosphere, if you will. It's a disjointed kind of family, but just breaking bread, being in community is really important. And that's the side of Bill Maher that I think is the most valuable. His show gets on my fucking nerves a lot now, and I think he has a lot of the same guests.
Club Random or Real Time?
No, Real Time.
Real Time.
Real Time. But I think the club piece is tapping into it. Right? And I wish that they had a camera in the green room afterward when everybody was hanging out. Because that's where the magic happens. You know that I've been backstage at your shows. And like, the families and the friends and the community, that's kind of the secret sauce. And whether it's Bill Maher or you, I want more of that.
I agree.
I want more of that.
Dude, I welcome that everywhere I go, and that's what I'm trying to create, another place for that. And it's like specifically about that compounding, right? Like, if we can do that, I think it'll enable better health for people. What I would love to see, and what I hope to get involved with, and actually through some of the future guests of the show, they're already involved in this, is affecting healthcare, where mental health care is just as important as physical health care within what is, a legislative, like, necessity, that the healthcare, companies, like, that they have to provide, or not healthcare companies, the insurance companies need to be able to provide that. Because what good is a country that's falling apart mentally? Like, we're doing that to ourselves. And we talk about health and Putin, like, what are the things I've got my own views on our food systems and what's going on with, what we're putting in our bodies, what's breaking down our ability to, even think clearly. We're like, sugar is such a problem. Ultra processed foods in general are overconsumed. I think there's a place for them, but they should be balanced. Shout out to Adam Bornstein and his wonderful book, You Can't Screw This Up. If you haven't read that one,
I will.
That is a wonderful, wonderful, like way to approach dieting and general health. But if you apply it as well, which I've been internalizing, apply it to your mental health, right?
Yeah,
Where
that's good.
where it's not like you're going to be perfect all the time. I think one of the quotes in there was from when he was working at Men's Health magazine, or it was some, I don't know. He was talking to Cindy Crawford, and she said she's like her goal, now with children and raising a family is be 80% good 80% of the time. And I think like
It's a realistic goal.
yeah,
right?
and that's part of it is like, set yourself up for success.
Don't shoot for perfect.
Yeah,
right?
perfect is going to cause you more stress and more anxiety than anything. And that's something I figured out with my health stuff. At one point when I was going through the physical, I was like, I'm going to be better than ever. I'm going to get stronger than ever. I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. And, I hurt myself trying to get stronger. Like I'm pushing too hard. And, then come the mental health challenges, it's the same deal. If I think I'm going to be perfect at like having no bad days, like that's just not how a brain works, I think. And if it is, like, can I get that Elon Musk implant? Because that would really help me out on some days. But like I think there's so many things that we're trained into, psychologically for our health, from food to stimulus mentally, all the inputs that we get that we're being dumbed down, like we're sort of like, we're shown like if you lose carbs, like you're going to hit that weight that you want and then you'll be fine. And the truth is you're probably going to like stress yourself out so much. You might not even like, like lose any weight, and it's going to affect you in other ways. So I think, what we're talking about and what we want to see come from this effort and just generally from people is the same. We want to see people take responsibility for themselves and realize like there's no one who's not being affected, and those that are either really good at filtering, really good at hiding some of that stuff, or just being able to handle it. Compartmentalization is a real thing in America, where you have your problems and you go to work and you put on your face, or for me, for years, go on stage and nothing's wrong. I'm having a great time. Everything's cool from what people can see, but inwardly, there's all kinds of shit going on. You're away from your family. You don't know when you're getting home to see your kid, or there's a problem at home and you can't deal with it. I mean, being a father is a whole other element we should talk about, because I think there's a lot of people out there who they have to work so much to make ends meet that they might as well be on tour, because they're not necessarily at home with their children. And that sets a really difficult scenario up where there's a whole bunch of kids who might not have a mom or a dad. And shout out to the women in our country, because honestly, I think they should be running this whole country and the world, and there's, my wife is an amazing person, as I know Lauren, your wife is, and I'm very grateful for her presence in my life. But I see, like, and there's a Will Ferrell thing where he's like, hey, like talking about men running the world, and he's like, hey, we're not doing so good. Like, maybe we should let the ladies take over. And he's so correct, because we've got two heads thinking for us, and it's also like we're like, generally like, wanting to be in power and it's like in control. And we've like grown up with this whole system of like the male hierarchy. And I don't think it's healthy for the world we live in. And I also don't think it's respectful of like how strong women really are. And getting back to fathers, as that's where that came from, that I don't want to not include my respect for ladies when I'm talking about men being, of course, like an important part of the family structure. Women are absolutely vital to that as well. I think there's also, same-sex couples that are, wonderful parents, and there's all kinds of scenarios out there. And I guess I'm just talking as fathers right now.
I think that's an important conversation. You and I talked about this. I think one of the most important conversations right now is men's pain. Because frankly, especially if you're a white man, nobody wants to hear your shit right now. Right? Like everybody else has had a hard time, and there's been privilege and authority that's been bestowed upon this community for a long period of time, this group of people for a long period of time. But there is a lot of pain happening among men who feel that they can't talk about it, who feel that it's a sign of weakness, who feel that no one wants to hear it. And sometimes they're right. No one does want to hear it because there's so much other stuff going on. But I think we have to take a holistic approach to the fact that we are a community and we need to take care of everybody.
Yeah.
And I think there's been some fantastic writing by Richard Reeves and Scott Galloway and others who are talking about the crisis of masculinity in America right now.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a man right now?
Yeah.
Who are your role models?
Right.
In a time when they're hard to find.
Yeah.
And I think we have to try to seek them out. We have to elevate them. We have to try to be them.
Yeah.
And I think, there's kind of one rule that I think overrides everything is just don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, don't be an asshole.
It's so
kind of a
basic,
good
yeah.
rule.
But it makes so much sense.
Don't be an asshole to your kids. Don't
Yeah.
be an asshole to strangers. Don't be an asshole to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty low bar, but
Yeah.
it's a hard one to hit sometimes.
Right. Especially when
And-
you're inundated with stress and
Right.
things. You know?
And it's hard to give others the benefit of the doubt. Everybody's walking in every room with so much baggage, but for me, it always kind of goes back to those basics. And I think about the honor of my life, which has been my kids. Like, the thing that we don't really cover in our bio is the last 5 years of my life, the primary focus has been my two little boys.
Yeah.
Raising my two little boys through a
Nothing more
pandemic,
important, yeah.
when I have this critical time with them where I know they're going to be older soon and they're not going to have as much time with me. But that was a difficult thing to accept too, to say, you know what? My career is not my priority.
Yeah.
My activism is not my priority. Making money is not my priority. These two little humans
Yeah.
are my priority.
Yeah.
And they need my best, they need my focus, and they need my example.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're old enough where they will check me.
Yeah.
And they will say, yesterday we were, it was raining in New York City. I was taking my boys to jiu-jitsu, so you have to walk through some winding streets in New York. Pouring rain, we're trucking along, and everybody's got an umbrella. And it's kind of challenging to be a tall person in a rainstorm in New York.
Yeah.
Because umbrellas hit you right in the face.
Totally.
Right? And so a guy hit me in the face.
It happens to short people too.
It happens to a lot of people, right? But there's a sense of a lack of self-awareness is no more profound than you watch people walk around the city with umbrellas in New York.
Yeah.
Especially.
Totally.
Right? It's different in
It's a great
Japan
point.
and other
Yeah.
places, right? And I needed my third Starbucks of the day to keep up with these boys and keep myself chugging along. And a guy walked by and just slammed me in the face with an umbrella. And I was like, yo. And my kid goes, what an asshole. And I was like,
Yeah.
and I said, Rye,
Yeah.
don't say it. He's like, but Dad, he's a real asshole.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we got to come up with a better word. And we decided the word was rude.
Yes.
Right? So maybe the G version is don't be rude.
Yeah.
Show a little courtesy. Treat people as you want to be treated. I know it sounds basic and folks listening have probably heard this
Yeah, but
before.
it's like that messaging of the most basic stuff. If we go back to that instead of the hate speech and the division.
And take a breath.
Yeah.
I know it sounds rote too, but I say this to my kids. So look, take a breath, count to 3 before you walk in every room. I can't do that. I used to try to do this, especially in my work, because I would go from a TV studio to a homeless shelter, to halls of Congress, and you're shifting a lot, like you are, I'm sure, as a musician, right? You're shifting into different pools, right? And just stopping, take a breath, count to 3, and then walk in the room. And
so it's really easy to let that emotion come right out.
It is.
And
you will fuck up.
Yeah.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You will fuck up.
Yeah.
You will make mistakes. It's not about perfection. It's more like baseball, right?
Yeah.
If you're hitting 300, if 3 out of 10 times you get a hit, you're an all-star.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And in this
we forget that
especially,
personally. And I think it's really easy in such a broadly negative environment that we live in and have to see on our phones every day, is when something bad happens to you, it's really easy to internalize that and think you're going to keep personifying that.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily what has to keep happening. It's also breaking that cycle.
Yeah.
Where you, to your point, no matter what's going on, if you just stop for a moment before you enter a new situation, recenter yourself.
Yeah.
Take that.
Some degree, if you can control your agency, right? If you can recognize and remind yourself that you're the one driving the car of your life, right? Then that's a different perspective. Don't allow yourself to be pulled off the road. Don't allow yourself to be distracted. You can decide how fast you go. You can decide where you're going, but it requires a degree of discipline.
Yes.
And that discipline provides freedom.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a difficult kind of combo, but I do think it's true. If you put in the work, if you protect yourself, if you protect your loved ones, then it gives you the freedom on a very basic level, just to think.
Yeah.
Right. Which is something I don't think enough of us have time to do,
Yeah.
or the freedom to feel, to actually process what just happened in the last 24 hours of your life.
Of your influences, right? To what is this really for me? You know, and that's not easy to unplug that stuff when you're considering where you're at with all this.
And you're important because conversation is key.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I found is like I wasn't making enough time to just connect with friends.
Yeah.
Without an agenda, without a business meeting, without a thing, like just hanging out with friends, being around family if that's an option.
Yeah.
Trying to find things that give you fuel.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've covered a lot. Like,
shit, man.
Everything I wanted to talk about, we've talked about. I like to ask people if there's like, something in your experience that you personally went through that I'm not even thinking about, that was traumatic, that was really challenging, and what was it? How did you get through it? And are you still managing it? And if so, how do you deal with that?
I think it's interesting you ask this question because in the last week I've reflected on it with my wife, in fact, that I have been through so many traumatic experiences in my life. Now that I'm almost 50 years old, I can reflect on it. Like, I've seen a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen a lot of shit, done a lot of shit, been a lot of places. I'm kind of graduating into this role of an elder, maybe earlier than I wanted, but getting old is tough, right?
Yeah.
It's a privilege and an honor, but it also sucks. And my 5-year-old son, River, had his birthday last week, and he turned 5.
Happy
and
birthday, River.
It's a beautiful thing. He's an amazing, incredible guy. He brings happiness to everyone in a way. Everybody says about their kid, but like, he's a very special kid that I'm honored to be his father.
Yeah.
But I also remember that 5 years ago when he was born, my wife almost died. We had a really tough childbirth.
Yeah.
And he was born, the first child we had, Ryder, was born 3.5 years prior. And when he came out, he wasn't breathing well. It was a really tough childbirth for the baby. And he ended up okay, but started out in the NICU. And that was very humbling because when you have a child, you're like, okay, it's going to be balloons and parties. Everybody's going to be cheering. I remember walking out and seeing my brother and my dad and a couple buddies, and they were like, yo, congratulations. I was like, nah. I was like, he's in an incubator right now. You don't expect that, right? For it to go sideways. For the first time you meet your son, for him to be in an incubator with tubes down his throat, and he's this beautiful little thing, right?
Yeah.
And that was traumatic, but he was okay, right? But when his brother was born, we were a little bit worried because Ryder's childbirth had been so difficult for him. But we're like, hey, this is pretty cool. Went well. Lauren's good. Baby's good. We were downtown, and they were like, go get a piece of pizza, Dad. Go for a walk. I was like, all right. And then I remember coming back, and things had shifted, and Lauren was kind of woozy. And to fast forward the story, I looked down, and she started kind of like passing in and out. I looked down, and I watched her stomach start to grow. And I could see she was bleeding internally. And it was like late at night, and I pulled the nurse, and I was like, hey, she's bleeding. And like, oh, I'm sure she's okay. No, like, and she said, are you a doctor? I was like, no, but I've seen some shit, and she's bleeding.
Yeah.
And they went and grabbed a doc, and fast forward, there wasn't a doctor on duty that could do the surgery. So I was watching my wife bleed internally, and then she passes out.
Oh my God.
And I watched her go out of consciousness. I watched them shut the entire hospital down. Now, I am also aware of the fact that I was there as her advocate. She's a white woman, and she is a person who was known in that hospital because she had been there before. But most of all, she had me there as an advocate. And what I later found out is a lot of women have much worse situations, in part because they don't have someone there to advocate for themselves, right? Or because they are not trusted.
Right.
And I called a friend of mine who was an OBGYN. As we were walking through this, he said, well, number one, be grateful you're in America, because if it was most other places, she'd be dead.
Yeah.
Right? But they caught it. There had been some internal bleeding. But there was a moment where the doctor walked in, and they rushed her to the ER, and he looked at me, and everybody was looking at me. And I'd been in enough situations where everybody had the oh shit look on their face. They had that look on their face where they were looking at me like, she might not make it. And you can't bullshit me. I know the situation. I know what's going on with my wife. I know she's lost a lot of blood.
Yeah. And
they rush her into the ER, and I knew it was really serious when they said to me, Dad, come with me. And they took me to visit the baby. And when I walked into the ICU, when I walked into the baby unit, as soon as I walked in, everybody stopped talking, and they looked at me. And then I knew, and the sign was, that's the guy.
Yeah.
And what they did was they said, come with me. They gave me the baby, and they put the baby in my arms because she was in surgery. Mm-hmm. And they knew that she might not make it, and they wanted me to be with the baby if she died. And I was in that moment where I knew I was where I needed to be. There was nothing I could do. And I think the trauma of not being able to control the situation, the trauma of having her go through that, the trauma of afterward, she woke up and said, boy, I must have been asleep for a while. Now, she went through a terrible thing, but she doesn't remember
She doesn't have any idea.
To this day,
memory of it.
She doesn't remember it.
Yeah.
And so what I've really come to grips with is the isolation of that, the recognition of that, the trauma of that was surprising, difficult. I've worked through it myself with my wife in therapy, but I also share it because I know a lot of other mothers and families have gone through this.
Yeah.
A lot of folks in this country, especially women of color, have had terrible situations.
Yeah.
And many women have died.
Yeah.
Far too many women die in childbirth in this country.
Yep.
I've been activist on a lot of shit. This was not something that I was planning on picking.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important because I have suppressed some of that trauma because it was so confused. Because it was the day my son was born, but it was also the day my wife almost died.
Like it's a joyful moment.
It's
the most
I say it's always his birthday and it's her alive day.
Mm.
Because I tell her, I was like, we almost lost you.
Yeah.
And thankfully we didn't.
Yeah.
She's great now. He's great now. But I think what it revealed for me is that it was something I didn't fully process as a trauma until recently.
Okay.
And I think that's maybe the takeaway that I would share with others.
Yeah.
Is if you really reflect, there might be something that was really hard and you just kind of put down, or maybe it came at a time when something else was happening, so you haven't fully faced it.
Right.
And for me, that was tougher than combat. That was tougher than 9/11. It was tougher than seeing a lot of other stuff that I've seen in my life. For some reasons I can't even explain. But I will always be etched in the moment where I walked into that baby unit and they all looked at me. And it was the look of like, that's the guy whose wife is dying. And I want to use that moment, to just talk about a lot of everyday trauma that exists in families, and the recognition that like we can come together.
Yes.
And we can do better.
Yes.
And we need to. But we can also recognize that there are some days that were just hard and sad. And that's how I've helped deal with that trauma is like the duality of my son's birth and my wife almost dying.
Yeah.
Is something that I'm still processing. Yeah. And the last thing I would share, maybe in wrapping all this conversation about trauma, pain, deep sadness, you kind of never get over it.
Yeah.
Right? It leaves a mark. And you kind of learn how to deal with it. You can be stronger in the broken places, as Hemingway once said.
Yeah.
I do believe that's true. But it leaves a mark.
Yeah.
And recognizing that it will leave a mark and it's something you may have to deal with or at least recognize or have on your body, whether it's your mental body or your actual body for a long time, is an important part of figuring out how to deal with trauma.
Yeah. There's another last.
That was a long one.
No, that was honestly very impactful and something I take to heart. And we all need to be respectful of just the I guess from the women themselves to the power of medicine and the people providing it. And that, like, we're so lucky to live in this time, in this era. And yes, there needs to be more like equanimity in healthcare for, women, from like, there's definitely disparity between how white women are treated and people of color. And that tears me up because I see us all as, we're just fucking people. And that's frustrating as hell. I am remembering a quote: pain has no hierarchy. There's no hierarchy to pain. Everyone feels it. Everyone goes through it. That's another from Adam Bornstein's book. I believe his wife quoted that one. And it's so true that, there's this stuff permeating us all. Yeah. And we really have to take it seriously. And I think especially now where there's so much like in the balance of that, like being, I don't know if I want to say corrected, but kind of want to say corrected, or addressed at least, and I think if we can do that, the things will improve for us as individuals, but also as a community, as a nation. Yeah. And that's really important to me because I feel like the reasons I landed here in America are because my grandparents and great-grandparents and all the generations were like aiming at this, and now it's not what they're aiming at or what they were aiming at. And I feel some kind of a responsibility to try to speak to that in the health focused capacity. Yeah. But through that, these are issues that affect that. So
I got one last one that I'll share with you that we talk about a lot on my show.
Yeah.
One of my favorite inspirational leaders is Mr. Rogers, which is during the pandemic something I introduced to my children and we've gone back to. And the old school Mr. Rogers, you can find them on YouTube, they're on Amazon. Mr. Rogers has a very famous line where he says, his mother used to say, when things are really bad, when things are terrible, when there's a real catastrophe, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
There are always helpers. There are always people who are running in when others are running out.
Yeah.
And I say that all the time to my kids. They represent the best of us,
Mm-hmm.
and they're running in when others need them, and that's happening every day.
Yeah.
And what you're doing in the show, you are a helper. So look for the helpers when you need that inspiration. You can find them even in the school shootings, even in the war. There are those people who run in and try to provide that courage and that leadership. And if you're up for it, you can be a helper.
Yeah.
And they're needed. There is no shortage of need.
Absolutely.
And
and
be
it
like
doesn't take. It can be small.
Be like Benj, everybody. Be like Benj, and I mean it. Be like Benj.
Well, I think that we can all make changes, large, small, or whatever, that will improve the quality of life for ourselves and others. And that is the point of what could be bad, is to take a step back and with some humility address those things. So
I love it.
Yeah, thank you for being
Congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
Congratulations on this new chapter.
Yeah, man. And you, like, everything you're doing is meaningful, and I'm just inspired by you. I'm so happy that you're my friend, and I'm really glad that we're both just doing our best to make this a better place. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this very special episode, and we will be back next week with some other fun. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.